So this is going to be part 2 of the interview with Paul. And what we're going to be talking about are the expectations on indie games, in comparison to AAA games. So, Paul.
Hello. What's going on? Lone Salesman here.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, what's a AAA game that you picked up recently?
Well, there's one I definitely want to talk about. Watchdog Legion. You ever heard of it?
Yeah, Watchdog Legion. I've seen you play it a little bit.
Dude, I had high hopes for that game, and it just did not deliver. Besides that, I guess the only other AAA game that I really played was Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
And Watchdog Legion. I know they're not the most recent, but out of all games, and then the Final Fantasy VII remake, because it was free on PSN. So I guess those three are the most recent AAA games I played. And what can I say about Watchdog Legion? It was messy, monotonous. The concept was fun, but the writing, the dialogue, everything else in between is just painful. I just couldn't. It was fun. I couldn't get myself to complete it just because it was just me doing the same thing over and over again. I liked the Watchdog 1 and 2, but it just didn't pan out for me. For Cyberpunk, I really enjoyed that game. It was messy on launch, and I'm running it on a GTX 1070 Ti. So I'm barely getting 30 frames per second. So the experience for me was still good despite the performance I was lacking. The story, the side quests, the world they built, I enjoyed everything. Grinding that game. I love the combat. It was just a little funny that I could, even on my friends bought it on a PS4 on console, and they had a pretty bad experience because the PS4 had really bad performance issues. So they couldn't get themselves to play it through, right? So I know they just released another big patch to fix a lot of bugs. I only ran into one or two that kind of were frustrating, that I couldn't complete a quest or something. Other than that, wasn't a big deal. And then I played the Final Fantasy VII remake, which was absolutely amazing. Beautiful game. I was talking to you a little bit about this. It was a little grindy. There were some parts. Me and you played the original one. So the original one's grindy, but like for Final Fantasy VII remake, that game was delayed. And then it came out great. For Cyberpunk, it was delayed several times and kind of fell on itself. Publicly, very publicly. It got stepped on a lot.
I got something to that.
Yeah.
Do you think that Final Fantasy VII had the same type of hype that Cyberpunk did?
Oh, definitely.
You think so?
Because I think out of all the Final Fantasies, right, which ones do people know the most?
Definitely 7 and 10.
And it's like people's favorite storyline, kind of. It's one of the more memorable. Personally, I think I like 6 better, at least the story. But 7 was it just came out around the right time, right? PS1, and it was just that big epic story on polygon graphics, but graphics didn't really matter. So I think what people wanted to see was after 15, they saw what Square Enix could do with the graphics. They wanted to see a remake of one of the other ones, right? So I think the best one to start off with was definitely Final Fantasy VII. I think there was a lot of hype around it. When it came out, I was excited for it.
Well, I meant more along the lines of like all the whispers, like when it was just a whisper. Because I remember Final Fantasy VII being talked about when, if I remember correctly, at the announcement of the PS4.
Mm.
And I could be wrong. My years could be mixed up, but I remember it being in its infancy as far as like gameplay graphics and what they were trying to do with it. And that's where Sony did really great by actually showing them like pre-alpha gameplay of the game.
Right.
And then they show it like going through its stages. So maybe that's just a management thing. Actually, it is a management thing because Cyberpunk's CD Projekt Red, the way they handled this game was just bad. But I'm not gonna try and like get too heavy into that because so many other people have covered that already.
Right.
But I think it's just a common expectation to kind of be put into the know. And the only other company or game fails to deliver every time is Star Citizen. Like that one game, if I'm not mistaken, is the most funded game in all of gaming history. Last I checked, it was like $387 million just crowdfunded for that game.
Yeah, you got people who they got all these rewards. You know, oh, we'll name a ship after you. Oh, we'll name this big frigate for you, or you'll have all these ships. But I mean, at some point, it's like, and they have a roadmap, right? I think
and they never do it.
Not too long ago, they had a roadmap to the roadmap. Okay, this is the roadmap to when we're actually getting... And I thought about that with Cyberpunk kind of because Cyberpunk's been in the works a long time and they did have gameplay previews. And the frustrating thing is a lot of things that were in the gameplay previews never were in the game. Like they had to cut it out. Like a lot of stuff had to get cut out. And the problem with Cyberpunk was the investors were not patient. They put money into the game and the investors wanted to cash out. Because it's like, okay, well, we want our money. With Star Citizen, you're not seeing that. You see people, they don't care how much money they put in. They're willing to wait for God knows what reason. I don't know.
I mean, that kind of answers that question because with Star Citizen, you're funding a nerd's dream. From what my friend Danny was telling me, because like he's a huge fan of Star Citizen, he was explaining to me, and I'm not entirely sure how true this is.
Okay.
But if I'll look a little bit more into it, and then I'll just drop a link into it. He was telling me that Star Citizen ended up developing their own version of ray tracing before ray tracing was even a thing.
Really?
Yep. So, I mean, if that is true, that's big if true.
Yeah.
And that's very underappreciated because it just goes to show you have really brilliant minds working behind I would say probably like a modern marvel of gaming.
Right. Well, I mean, something like that. I mean, performance and graphics. Like, okay, I think that's interesting that they came up with some sort like that visual display like that. But where does the gameplay come in? Like, okay, like with Cyberpunk, the coolest thing was a lot of things are inspired from this series, like the books. The original books, like you got Ridley Scott films like Alien, Blade Runner, so many things inspired from Cyberpunk. And now we're seeing like a true adaptation of that world into a game, into an open world game. So it was really exciting. And they executed well on the world and the lore aspects, but it's like, it's cool that you put that in. And for people like me and my other friend, who are reading the holodiscs and we're reading the books in game and we're learning more about the lore that was in the books and stuff, we enjoy that. But the common person who plays it, maybe, they just want to run around with a katana and kill people in like at least 60 frames per second on their PS. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. That's what they want to do. They want to drive around without it being glitchy, and they want to play the game. And the developers talked about this, and they were like, "Well, we were building the game to be super like visually impressive, right? Like that's what they're." And then they were like, "Well, we figure we can scale it back later on," but the closer they got to the release date, the more they realized that they couldn't scale back because they had put so much stuff into it. Like lower grade consoles and PCs just couldn't run it. So, like on Metacritic, if you look at the PC user scores versus the console user scores, the PC one's like averages around 85, whereas the console is around 50, 55. And that's because they couldn't play it. And that's the biggest thing for your game. You got to be able to play it, right? So like, okay, if Star Citizen can come up with ray tracing, that's cool, but when can I play it?
Well, that's kind of like where they're in a very peculiar position because they have so much funding. They have so much funding for it being a AAA title, but they're developing it like they're indie game developers. Like there are no expectations.
Yeah.
You don't have a day for you to sit down and play this game on your console. We don't have any set date. This is just like a Hail Mary of a game development thing that has an absurd amount of funding for, and we're gonna ride it out because we got your money. Just
Right.
fuck you. Like that's how I feel about it.
Well, yeah, it's all right. So if they truly are indie developers, they're developing it like that. You look at that versus Cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk's produced by CD Projekt Red, which came up with the Witcher series. That was like their only game that kind of like picked up. So after Witcher 3, even though the launch was so-so, the game was amazing. One of the highest rated single player RPG games. Like it took a lot of awards, 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s. It was fantastic. So when they heard that, oh, the same company is developing Cyberpunk, this totally badass universe series, and they're releasing all these previews and stuff, and this is their first open world first person shooter, you know, people were excited. And you know what? I think that's what it was. It's like they had these high expectations because this is somewhat of a AAA company, fairly new, but they can produce good games. And they're releasing all these previews, so people were excited. Star Citizen, like, it's like a breadcrumb trail. It's like, okay, we're kind of like, it's like a slow build. It's kind of like when you compare Marvel's versus DC when it comes to like the movies, right? You look at Marvel's Avengers movies, right? They did the movies very carefully, and you know they took their time. DC, they released like 3 or 4 films, went straight into like the big Justice League movie, and then it didn't do as great until people wanted to see the Snyder cut, and that's what's going to happen with Cyberpunk. People are going to be like, well, we want to see the real cut of Cyberpunk. We want to see what it really meant to be. Like one game I can compare that to is No Man's Sky. When No Man's Sky came out, that game was super hyped up. Because the game was advertised is you can fly in your ship in an endless procedurally generated universe of different planets, and you can see different creatures. That was the gimmick to it. It was like an endless exploration. When it came out, it didn't deliver right. There wasn't really a constructed story. I mean, it's still like kind of there. It's a little ambiguous. The exploration was so-so. The gameplay was also so-so. But now, after like several updates over like past 3 or 4 years, it's amazing. And you know, I picked it up a couple of years ago and played with my friend and played by myself, and I had a blast. Like, it was fun. And I'm hoping the same thing happens with Cyberpunk. And that's what some people are saying is, well, okay, maybe on initial release it didn't do well, but maybe later, you know, they'll fix it up and it'll be great.
Well, I'm never going to touch No Man's Sky. And here's the reason why. So my buddy Nathan, he lived like right next door to me, and I would let him come downstairs and play on my computer because he didn't have a rig. And he was like, hey, I want to put No Man's Sky on here. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, cool. I heard all about the hype. And so he goes and he starts to play it. He's like, man, this looks amazing. And then blue screen of death. Yeah, no shit. My computer was out.
No,
My computer was out for like 3 fucking days. And you know what I had to do to fix it? I just had to pop out that fucking CMOS battery and the motherboard. That's it.
Funny.
That's it. Yeah, but I continuously give him shit for that game. I was like, fuck that game. I'm never gonna play it. I don't even want to hear about you playing it. That game is fucking ass.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but like, luckily, Cyberpunk, it didn't give me a bad taste in my mouth like that way. Well, the way that fucking No Man's Sky did.
Right.
It damn near brick. Well, it did brick my computer. So, but Cyberpunk, I would like to see like a nice. Well, I think it's not a matter of if, it's when, because even with Street Fighter V, that game on launch, that game was ass. You only had like 8 characters to choose from. Now you have a big roster, and the net play was god awful. Things were clunky, but it is a game that plays natively in 60 frames per second. And with Street Fighter 6, when that comes out, from the rumors, quote unquote, that I'm seeing on Twitter, when that game comes out, Q3 2022, that game is supposed to be coming out running at 120 frames per second. Nice. You know how fucking crazy that is to me? Because that game already looks silky smooth to me already. And for it to be at 120 frames, I don't know. I don't know if my eyeballs are going to be able to comprehend what I'm looking at.
What worries me with the console, right? Because when PS5 and Xbox came out, they promised the games could be in 120 frames, 4K, whatever. But I know one game that came out, Miles Morales, the new Spider-Man game, you couldn't play that game in 60 frames per second and 4K at the same time. Like if you wanted to play in 4K, it was in 30. But if you played in regular 1920 1080, then it was like 60 or above. And then you got to realize not everyone still has like a 4K TV, right?
Right.
I have one, but not I don't have like a 4K monitor. Even then, it's like I think that like on 120 frames per second thing is a cool idea, but I feel like the technology is still not as accessible. I mean, I think true gamers will already have that kind of stuff. When you look at average Joe Schmo playing on his TV, he's gonna have a 60 hertz TV with 1080p. Maybe he has a 4K TV, but I don't know if it can go up that high. But when you're talking about PC, it's different, right?
Right.
Most people who play PC already have that. So going back to indie games, like I know a lot of indie games started getting like when they come out, it's usually just 60 frames per second, right? I mean,
it depends on the programmer and what they want with it, because I mean, you also have to look into like what kind of indie games you're trying to play, because if it's something like a card game, it doesn't really matter if it's 60 frames or not. You can get away with just doing 30 frames. Nobody's gonna pay attention to like the way a card falls onto the fucking mat. Like what? It's stupid. Because
I know Escape from Tarkov for the longest time had a feature. You really couldn't go past 120, and you'd have to kind of like finagle your way to get a higher FPS. Now it's updated to where you can kind of adjust it, but
I know that with indie games, they do have their adjustments and patches and stuff that they occasionally work on. One game in particular that I've been kind of keeping my eyes on was it's this game called Small Saga. I want to pull it up really quick.
Okay.
So the game itself is pretty amazing. I played the demo. It's out for free, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fuck out of it, and I was just blown away with like the little nuances that it kind of references to. Yeah, I'm a loser. I like JRPG games, so this game.
I love them too, man. This kind of stuff is fun, like the cool backdrops.
Mm-hmm. And like whenever I was playing the demo, it kind of explains like what the hell's going on. But I just thought it was cute, like
it does look cute. I would play this.
Yeah, it's like it mixes in it being cute, and it tries to tug on the heartstrings.
Yeah.
Which I think is really amazing, because it shows that he cared about the characters themselves, he cared about the development, and he cared about the writing, and like he had a clear vision for it, and you don't see that a whole lot with like, dude, like Hellblade. Fuck that game. That game was fucking ass, and I will be the first person to say that shit. And anybody that wants to think otherwise, dude, fight me. All right, I hate that fucking game. That was a waste of $12 if I've ever spent it, and I'm not. Oh god, like I am.
Okay, to give people some context, we're talking about Hellblade, Senua's Revenge. I believe that's what it's called, something like that. But it's
fucking called waste of my goddamn time. Hellblade, Senua's fucking regret. I hate that game.
If you don't know, it's basically a third person. I wouldn't call it an RPG. It's just an action.
Dude, it's a fucking puzzle game where you have to walk through stupid ass gates so that you can see the world in a different way through a fucking schizophrenic person. Cool. Awesome. Holy shit. How does that game get so much funding? The great design. Dude, I am so certain that the people that worked in that game were just kind of wondering, what the fuck is this? And then you end up looking at a cute game like fucking Small Saga, and you're like, damn, this is way more digestible than that fucking hunk of shit. Like, oh. Everyone has a game that pisses them off to that point, and that was one of them more recently.
I played it. I didn't complete it. I got it on the Xbox Game Pass. Someone enjoyed it. It was fun to play, but I can see why Josh is frustrated. I mean, here's the thing. I think both games did have a vision, and they both wanted to go somewhere, but...
Yeah, bring that vision to fucking Netflix where they'll buy it for $1 million and then put it out there that way. Don't put it onto a fucking video game console. I don't want to play that shit.
There are certain games that act as a story. They're more like, okay, when you take games like that are little too story based, where the gameplay is just like you press a few buttons or you walk around. There's a few games like like Detroit Become Human, right?
That game was funny just because of internet historian. He would just he made that game look so much fun because of all the jokes and shit. So that's why I like it. Yeah. I would never play it.
For me, I enjoy a game like that every now and then when I don't want to like actively play something. But in that game though, there's a little bit more consequences. Whereas in Senua's Revenge, I mean, you die. So they have this mechanic where if you die, they say this tattoo is gonna like engulf you, and then you have to start all the way over. But from what I've read, that doesn't happen. Like, people have tested it and they've died multiple times and they never had to restart the whole game. So I thought that if I died too many times, I'd have to start over. Like, it was a short game, but if you made too many mistakes, then you have to go back all the way from the beginning. So I thought that was cool. But then I found out that's not the case. So I was a little disappointed, and I was just like, I don't want to play this.
How can you be disappointed into like what the programmer was probably saving you from? Yeah. They saved you your fucking time.
True.
For that god-awful fucking piece of shit of a game.
Like, okay, this Small Saga game you brought up, I think is it's wonderful, right? I look at a game like that and I look at a game like Undertale, right? For me, Undertale was like groundbreaking to me.
In what way?
In just the way they write, subvert your expectations, just like the way you play it is it's basically, if you don't know what Undertale is, it's kind of like...
Do they know what Undertale is?
Okay.
But like, explain to me, like, what was... All right, so with a game like Undertale, what was like a game that was very similar to that game that you played earlier on as a kid or earlier on in your life?
So Undertale was really close to Earthbound, which I played. I didn't play it when I was young, but it also reminded me a little bit of like Pokemon because you're fighting creatures, and it's like your old school RPG, but the gameplay is a little different, and the story is without giving too much away. It just goes in two crazy different directions, depending how you play it. And I thought that was cool. Like, I like games like that where it's got like a somewhat of a karma system where every action you take has a significant outcome on the ending. So I like games like that where your choices actually matter. Like I don't like games where Senua's Revenge, where you take a choice, but no matter what, you're going to the same. It's the same no matter what you do, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no choices, or there's sometimes the illusion of a choice, and that sometimes happened in Cyberpunk. For the most part, Cyberpunk had that, but there are some games like I don't know, like Watchdog Legions. When I was playing that, like when you kill certain people, you choose to leave them alive. It didn't matter. It didn't like affect the end of the game. You look at Dishonored. If you ever played Dishonored, that game had a difference too. Like if you didn't kill anyone in the game, it changed the ending. Or if you did kill a bunch of people, then it made things worse. So I like games that have that influence. Not all games need to have that. Like small Saga, like if it's a distinguished story that you want to tell, then that's fine. You don't need choices. That's fine. If you're telling that character's story, right? Like we're talking about
but it still gives you choice.
Yeah, like Final Fantasy VII kind of gives you the illusion of choice sometimes, like the remake, where it's like, oh, choose what flower you want to pick, or choose who you want to take out on a date. And it's like, okay, like this is just fan service or whatever. This doesn't really matter because we're still talking about Cloud Strife. This isn't you. Like when you're playing a game, like I like games where you can immerse yourself into that character, like in Dragon Age. Like in Dragon Age, you got that option as well, right? You can make any choice you want, and it affected the outcome of the game. I like stuff like that.